Welcome to the Nessa Off Air podcast. I'm excited about this week's episode. We have the talented music journalist and author Sowmya Krishnamurthy joining us to explore the dynamic world of hip hop's impact on fashion, specifically high fashion. A quick heads up, we recorded this episode back on October 23rd of 2023. Since then, a lot has changed on some subjects that we do talk about, so keep that in mind as you listen. Prepare for a journey filled with nostalgic hip-hop moments and fun memories of us wearing our Tommy Hilfiger bootleg jackets. It's a whole story. You'll find out. Find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy this episode of Nessa Off Air. I am today years old finding out that Tommy Hilfiger did not say anything racist.
Crazy, right? You didn't have to burn all your bootleg Tommy. You could be wearing it right now.
Wow.
Insane.
Okay, so you dispelled this and clearly addressed the whole situation. Tell us more about it, because I think this should be discussed more. And it's very problematic how that rumor traveled the world, continued. And for someone who I like to think I'm somewhat informed, did not know that was not the case. So tell us more about it, because I think it's really important as we have this conversation and sharing the facts. Music journalist, pop culture expert, hip hop journalist, now author. Congratulations, Sowmya, on your new book, Fashion Killa: How Hip Hop Revolutionized High Fashion. Can we just take a moment to appreciate your book, like the actual feeling of this? It feels very rich, just like what the book is all about, high fashion. But this is Fashion Killa. But you know what? I really appreciate a nice book. It doesn't feel like, just a regular paper cover. By the way, I'm not hating on other books, but this...
I am hating on other books.
We are.
Yeah,
okay, wait. The texture, though.
Yeah.
Can we take a moment to... take a moment to appreciate
It's very
this?
vibey, and that was intentional. Like the whole idea of the book feeling like a luxury product, because books are kind of this luxury. It's having something tangible, something you can collect, put it on your coffee table or with a selfie. So I wanted to, even if you didn't open up page one, you could still have this book and it would feel very sexy and very luxe.
I love this. How much did it cost? A lot? Was this part really expensive to get this kind of cover?
I mean, it's $28.99, so I think it's worth it. Whatever the extra couple, cents here and there, I think it's worth it.
I love this. Okay, so we have to talk about your book, because you put your heart and soul into this.
Last 3 years, this was my pandemic project.
Ooh. So you didn't go into bread making or
No,
plants.
I'm trying to eat fewer carbs. So no bread making. I thought this was a good way, like a lot of people, and I'm sure, you guys felt this as well. We're so used to working and you're always interviewing artists or going to shows and events. The pandemic happened and everything just came to a standstill.
Right.
And our industries, being in journalism, nobody was really doing interviews. We weren't sure what sort of the next steps were. So for me, I really wanted to focus on a positive project. I'd been thinking about doing my first book, and it was just a great time to sit still, be very intentional, and then kind of go into that book writing trenches. So from proposal to when you see it on the bookshelves, almost 3 years exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a marathon.
Okay, wait. So many questions about that, because I saw some of your tweets. But I guess it was just well known that that's what hip hop did. But then when I really thought about it and I really went through the book, I was like, wait a minute. A lot of these moments, one, I didn't know about, which we need to discuss. Ooh. But really, the impact that hip hop had on high fashion is remarkable. Do you feel like it gets the credit that it deserves?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely not. It's funny.
Even at the fashion shows?
It's interesting because on one hand, now things like the Met Gala, Paris Fashion Week, that's just part of the lexicon where, coming up, I had no clue what any of that stuff was. We could barely pronounce Versace until Kanye told us we were pronouncing it wrong the whole time. And, it's funny, as I was even pitching this book, most people passed, which is crazy because now you think of the critical love and all of the press love, and you talk to people in hip hop and it makes total sense. But they really felt there's just not enough. Okay, it's rappers wearing nice clothes. That's a part of it, of course, but the book showcases everything from the sumptuary laws of like Europe that basically define who gets to wear what clothing, all the way to psychology, like social signaling and how clothes basically showcase to the world what we want people to think of us as, treat us as, and then going into things like culture and history and all of these other nuances. So once you actually read the book, you realize, of course, there's going to be your favorite moments, Kanye, Lil Kim, Cardi B, all of those things. But I really wanted to give it that much more deeper investigation and delve into the topic. So now when you see it, it makes total sense. But in the beginning, pitching it, I'm going to be honest with you, it was a lot of no's.
Wait, what do they say? Are they like, hey, no, we're okay? Do they go through somebody else? Do they tell your agent? How are they saying no? I'm just so curious how this world works. Give us the behind the scenes. Yes.
So writing a nonfiction book proposal, the proposal is actually, I would say, probably one of the hardest parts. So in fiction, you usually finish the whole manuscript and you have to submit that. Here, you outline the whole book. What is this about? What every chapter is going to be? Why are you the person to write it? So I thought the proposal was pretty good. And a sample chapter, and mine was about Kanye at the time. This is 3 years ago. Okay, it was less controversial at the time. And it was about him doing his Paris Fashion Week, that big debut where it was like him, Farnsworth, Virgil, that famous picture we've all seen and probably made fun of during the Tumblr era. And you basically pitch that around. And again, I can't tell you how many big publishers, people who claim they love hip hop, they publish hip hop books, were just like, yeah, we just don't think it's big enough. And I'm looking around like, but look at how you're dressed. That's Kanye made you dress that way. Or even the fact, Balmain, Balenciaga, Comme des Garçons, the fact you even know those words is because of hip hop. But they didn't understand it. And it was crazy because I was already looking 3 years later that Hip Hop 50 is around the corner. This would be great to put a stake in the ground as the first anthology of hip hop fashion. But again, it's funny. I've kind of been calling this my reasonable doubt. Like if everybody remembers, Jay-Z got rejected by every label and then he made a classic. So in many ways, I feel very close to Hove right now. It's like, I know exactly what you went through. Yeah. Crazy, right?
That is. Wow.
I just want to put it down now for everybody. Let's just see who copies. Because usually that's what happens. Something does well,
right,
and then you start to see the derivatives. So no shots, but major shots. I could start to see, I'm just saying that you might start seeing more books like this.
I think the next one we'll see how rock and roll revolutionized high fashion.
Oh, it might even just be hip hop. It could be the same thing.
Continuation.
No,
that might be too much of a ripoff of you, don't you think?
I mean, one thing about creative industries, whether it's publishing, the music business, one person has to do it, and if it works, everyone just kind of copies. So that's, you know how it is, right? Like even young artists, you kind of tell them, if you want to get on really fast, just copy what's on the radio.
Right.
Sure.
Turn on the radio. If that's what's hitting, you need to copy that. Now, you're not going to make an impact, but you're going to secure some sort of a bag.
How did you know there was a void discussing how hip hop impacted high fashion? Was this research done? Obviously, because you are a journalist. This is what you do. So was it a part of it where you just one day something just triggered something in you and you're just like, wait a minute?
Yeah, my Google searches are really strange. I spend a lot of time just in like the hole of random obscurity. Right. I promise I have a life. I was assigned an article for XXL 5 years ago. So almost 5 years ago to the date. And it was supposed to be about 1,300 words about hip hop and high fashion. And even the editor's like, oh, it's not going to be a heavy lift. I was like, all right, great. Interviewed like A$AP Ferg, Misa Hilton, people like that. It was easy. Probably wrote it in like a day. And in that process, I realized that there were no books about it. Like there were a few magazine articles, a couple of newspaper articles, mostly, from like the 90s or back in the day. And I just kind of put that, away in my mind. As writers, we oftentimes have ideas, and I didn't really think about it until fast forward, a couple of years later when it came time to embark on this book project. And for me, I feel like if there's a void in the marketplace, that's an opportunity. And it's better to do that than some of the ideas people were pitching me. And I'm like, but that's been done before. Like, that's not interesting or inspiring. And I also wanted something where I have an expertise, but I could also learn. And for me, I love hearing that you learn something because I really think whether you're a hip hop fan or a fashion head or just a pop culture aficionado, like you will learn something in this book.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's a great takeaway.
That's great. At the time, did you want to write a book or did you realize that the void was there? So were you like looking for something to write about?
I mean, I think, with most writers, you get to a point where what's the next step? So you start with like the baby, 300 word articles, and then you get up to like the 1,000 word, and then you get your first cover story, and that's a really big deal. But at this point, I'd gotten the cover stories, I'd done online, print, podcasting, TV, like a variety of things. So it's sort of what's next. And inherently, I'm a Capricorn, and we just like love to work. What's always on to the next? What's the new challenge? And for me, just book writing felt like the next elevation in my career. And also as a woman of color in hip hop, there's not a lot of representation in the literary space. I mean, in journalism, period. But once you get to that lit world, it's even the more like Ivory Tower, a little bit of like the good old boys. So to me, it was also, again, a great opportunity of shaking that room up a little bit, because I think it needs to be. So for me, yeah, anytime I see an opportunity, it gets me excited.
You had tweeted about that and just talked about how it is a boys' club in this space of publishing.
Yeah.
Were you...
And hip hop and life,
like the
America.
world.
Yeah.
Were you surprised? Were you not surprised? Is it something that you were just used to? Or were you just like, wow, I mean, I knew gatekeepers existed, but I didn't know it was at this level?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because even in hip hop journalism, for the bulk of my career, I mean, I've oftentimes been one of the only women in the space. And I mean, I think you can attest to this. Women in hip hop media are oftentimes pigeonholed into like, okay, well, as a woman, this is the lane that you stay in.
Sure.
And for me, I feel like as long as that's organic to you, that's great.
Right.
But for me, I could only always be myself. So I'm going to err, a bit more on the nerdy side, the esoteric side. That's just who I am. And I also love rap. So you can't force me to only ask artists about like their love lives or sex lives. If it doesn't intrigue me, it's just not going to come up in conversation. So I think kind of that idea of representation has always been there in my career since day one. What's interesting about the lit space, it's definitely more men, a lot of white men. It's funny, I was looking at the Amazon rap charts recently, because that's where I live now, on the book charts, and I was the only woman.
Wow.
Even on the rapper books, because I know who the ghostwriters are, I know who the co-writers behind the scenes are, it's like all guys. So to me, another part about this book, I really hope it opens up opportunities for other women, for them to feel like this is an inclusive space. Maybe not at this moment, but only by more people getting to the space, by doing well, excelling, will the landscape open up. And I think that's really important, even in documenting hip hop stories.
Right.
Who's documenting them, through what lens. Even in this book, it was very important representation insofar as region. So it wasn't just a New York centric story, making sure, talking about the West Coast, talking about the South, the international perspective, of course, Europe and Asia and things like that. Also in the names we're highlighting, it can't just be the bold-faced names that already get like the marquee placement. Let's focus on people who might be more unsung heroes, or maybe even names like a Lil Kim or Kimura that but let's contextualize them within this narrative of what their impact truly is. So that was very important. I think that level of discernment you only get when you come almost from an outsider perspective. Like you're not just trying to write another hip hop book that's on the shelves. Like you're really trying to change the paradigm.
You interviewed over 100 people for this.
Yeah.
Who?
Again, I promise you I have a life. Yeah.
And who was the hardest person to get to interview with you?
Well,
be it schedules, be it whatever.
Yeah, interestingly, doing a lot of this during COVID was tough because my style of interview, like my best interviews have always been in person.
Right.
And I've been very lucky, especially when you write for print or online, the cameras are off. And then there's a level of, I think, intimacy that's inherently there. I've spent sometimes days with artists. You get to go to their house, open their fridge. That was me opening their fridge, not them actually inviting me to open their fridge. And by the end, like there is a level, I think, of transparency that you don't get in other mediums. So it is harder when you're doing things during COVID. Cameron was my first in-person interview. And funny story, I mean, I'm a huge Cam fan. I got to interview him at Aviane Jewelry store right before he's about to go do Versus. So he
So
was like,
great.
yeah,
What a
so
moment.
What a moment. And he had said he had just run into Jada and he was like, just talking like usual, like cam shit. And that was really cool. Obviously asking him about the infamous pink outfit, where that came from. The backstory was, so he wanted to be written about in Page Six. And Page Six, very well-known gossip column in the New York Post. And it's funny. So I grew up in a small town in Michigan. I used to read Page Six every day.
It's so
because
great.
to me, I wanted to know like where people hang out, like who was canoodling with who. That was the word you used back then. So it was really funny. So I think that was hard, just sort of the COVID situation. Another person that was high on my list was Kanye. And I was talking to his team right before sort of all hell broke loose. And, I had to take a step back because he was still doing a little bit of press and ask myself, is this going to be beneficial to the book? Because where he was, the kind of interviews he was doing, what he wanted to speak about, to me, I didn't feel that would be beneficial. It would almost just be kind of like being a troll or like some sort of a publicity grab. And I didn't want this book to be that. So I made the decision to kind of, let that do its thing.
I mean, you have 2 pages in here, just a timeline
Yeah.
of Kanye and the impact he's had on fashion. So I do feel that you tried your best to,
Yeah.
share what he's done when it comes to this space. Was there anything that you learned about Kanye or Cam or whoever that you didn't know before when it comes to their impact in fashion?
Definitely Tupac. Yeah.
Why are you surprised about this? I am not surprised. Katrina, are you surprised?
No, I mean-
I'm going to go back to, I think it's part of the bias, a part
Yeah.
of the coverage when it comes to East Coast, West Coast bias, when it comes to media coverage in general. But
Yeah.
I'm so curious. What did you learn about him that you didn't know before?
Well, I knew Pac had always been sort of this multi-hyphenate. I mean, rapper, actor, but a lot of people don't realize his affiliation with Versace. And he actually walked in a Versace show in Milan right before he passed. It was him and his then girlfriend, Kidada Jones, and his bodyguards. It's a very interesting photo of them. And what I found quite intriguing is just these parallels between Tupac and Gianni Versace that many wouldn't inherently think about. Before their time, they were both very much rebels. They were kind of going against the grain, but they also had a certain X factor. In the same way Pac attracted people of all different walks of life, so did Gianni. And he was known to be one of the first designers to embrace celebrity. Now it's regular to see a designer or creative director taking selfies with all the celebs, but Gianni loved to surround himself with the supermodels, but then he might have Madonna sitting at a table and Mike Tyson and Tupac, and that's just who he was. So that was very interesting. And then also for Pac, just his story of working with brands like Karl Kani, April Walker. So he was very much contributing to hip hop brands, but then also beloved in the high fashion space. And a lot of people don't remember, but in Hit 'Em Up, one of his sort of assaults on Big is that I put Versace on, not you. And again, that's something because the opening stanza still takes the headlines. People don't remember that Versace was the rights to who was first in the Versace space. So Pac was an interesting sort of character study to delve into. And again, on any given moment, he stays in the news. He is continues to stay in the news. But I think this facet of him, I would love to see amplified more.
I definitely learned how to say Versace from Pac.
Wow.
Before, I want to say when Kanye was talking about it, fast forward years later and was talking about the pronunciation behind it. But I remember it because Pac was talking about it so much. For me, I think the images of him with opened up silk Versace shirts is so iconic to me. But also Karl Kani. Pac, to me, he embodied all fashion in that way. You had an interesting story. You don't have to say too much of it, but just a little bit, just enough for people to understand why your book is so important and documenting not just, the glitz and glam of the fashion, but really the stories behind why somebody wanted to wear a brand. For example, why did Pac want to wear Karl Kani? And what was that conversation like?
Yeah, I mean, Karl has spoken about this, but when I interviewed him, he relayed this great story of he wanted Pac to be the face of his brand. And Pac had already been sort of an organic ambassador wearing the clothes and videos and things like that. So Karl tells a story. He's at the SLS Hotel in Beverly Hills, and Tupac is furiously typing away on his computer. Now, we got to go back to what year this was. It was probably like some big clunky PC. It was like a sexy, a MacBook. And, he's got like the blunt in his mouth and he's furiously typing away on some script. Who knows what script this was? I'm sure that could auction off for millions, right? And he basically, Karl, he's like, all right, well, I'm a Gemini. He's a Gemini. There's synergy there. And he finally asks him, hey, would you model for my line? Pac's like, yeah, sure, I got you. All right, well, here comes the awkward conversation. Well, how much are you going to charge me? And according to Karl, Pac was like, nothing. You're black. I'm not going to charge my people anything, which, again, just shows what an incredible ambassador he was at that time. I mean, to work with this upstart line, but then also to say to do it pro bono. And Karl says that infamous picture of Pac sitting on the basketball rim wearing Karl Kani, that famous ad, was also creative directed by Pac. So he offered his face, and then he also offered his directing services for free.
Wow.
That probably wouldn't happen in 2023. But back in the 90s, rappers were still giving away stuff for free.
Do you think Pac would have had his own line? I mean, there was a little bit of a Machiavelli. I remember this. Don't judge me. I was at Burlington Coat Factory at the time. And it was like a kid's line of like little Machiavelli shirts, because I remember buying it for some kids I knew like that were part of my family. But do you think he would have had his full on, after your research, after what you know, obviously we'll never know the truth behind it, but your assessments on that?
I think Pac was such a visionary. I could see him doing a variety of things.
Sure.
I don't know if he would have the patience to sit there and focus on one line, just because having your own line is such a resource suck. It's a huge investment financially, sweat equity and otherwise. I could see him being more of a creative director. So maybe he would have gone in-house to like Versace and been similar to what Pharrell is at Louis Vuitton. I could see him very much working with upstart designers, helping bolster them, maybe some sort of incubator program. But I don't know. For me, Pac, I didn't see sort of the business gene and that sort of money-making gene the way other people have. To me, he was an artist. It was about the art and the love and connecting with people. And the fashion industry, at the end of the day, is a business. And the problem is with a lot of lines, if you're not selling clothing, what are you doing, right? You can have all these great ideas and vibes and all of this stuff, but at the end of the day, it's a business. And for me, I just didn't see that in him because he was such a free spirit and visionary, but who knows?
I want to talk about Big, because this was something I learned. I did not know he was the first rap artist to wear BAPE.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It just...
I'm sorry, Soulja Boy. You should watch this. I know, you're coming
You
for
have
me.
a picture in your book, too. I've never seen the picture.
Yeah, you can show the photo.
Yeah.
So in hip hop, there's this ongoing battle. Who popularized bathing ape, right? BAPE.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, it's Pharrell, because that was during the...
Yes.
Yeah,
That's exactly who I thought.
Trucker hat, the BAPE, that was just the whole vibe right then in the early aughts. Now, for a younger generation, it might be Soulja Boy.
Sure.
Because he, too, was like the BAPE guy. Based upon who you ask, it could be Lil Wayne, because Lil Wayne wore that on the cover of Vibe, and that was one of the reasons for the whole sort of Pharrell versus Lil Wayne back and forth. And as I was doing research, I was really shocked, because I'm a huge Biggie fan, to realize that he wore BAPE right before he passed.
Like
I know.
right,
This is
right
days
before.
Days before he passed. And sadly, the photographer, Sean Mortensen, who took that photo, is no longer alive. So I interviewed his mom, because his mom runs his estate. And she said that Sean was taking pictures of Biggie. I believe it was for Wax Poetics magazine. And Sean was the one wearing BAPE because he knew Nigo. And was like, hey, Nigo's my friend, and I would love to send a picture of you wearing BAPE. And Biggie's like, all right, whatever. But he had to drape it on him because, Big was a larger guy and the hoodie didn't fit. And he took the photo. And I spoke to somebody at BAPE who said, according to what he's been told, Biggie was interested in getting some custom pieces.
Wow.
But again, he passed right after. So that was very interesting. There is a parallel of the Beastie Boys because they were also early BAPE fans. They worked with Nigo even on like little action figures. But when I got the dates, I could not confirm that they were before him. So to me, it was like, I got to put the stake down that Big was the first.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
Do you think it would have had the same trajectory if it was Big as the person that everyone thought was the forefather of BAPE in hip hop?
Well, I think it was such a different era, right? So 97 versus like 5-6 years later as we get into the aughts, that is the rise of streetwear. So I think in the late 90s, we weren't probably ready for it.
A little early.
The prints, the silhouettes, that just wouldn't have hit in the same way. But it is interesting because even Biggie, I do see him as a high fashion icon for plus size men. Like he was somebody, and it's funny, Puffy had mentioned this in a Twitter spaces during the pandemic and how Big wanted to dress sexy like him. He's like, well, you get to wear Versace and you get to wear cool clothes. What about me? So Biggie would get tailors to put these custom outfits together in his size. So now fast forward, you see people like a DJ Khaled doing a collabo with Dolce & Gabbana. But I don't think that happens without someone like a Biggie who, put that stake in the ground. Like bigger guys can be sexy, attractive. Of course, following people like Heavy D and things of that nature. But that all comes from that sort of uptown vein, which I think is really interesting.
I want to go back to Pac really quick because a lot of people don't realize I want to say was the How Do You Want It music video, right? Where he is doing like a mini fashion show in that music video.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do.
Was that before or after Milan? I'm assuming after Milan, right? Because
I believe it's before. I believe it's before.
Because Pac actually walked at the fashion show in Milan.
Yeah, but he wasn't very confident. He was like looking down.
Was he?
Yeah,
Hold
so
on,
his
let me go
bodyguard had done a book and his bodyguard was also in the show with him. And you can tell like Pac's body language, he didn't have that confidence that you would think he would have. And, I think a lot of it, he was a fish out of water.
Right.
Milan was one of his first international trips. And I think he would just, in many ways, he was a kid in a candy store. According to his bodyguard, he was just so enamored by the beauty of the Italian women and the way that they were sort of reflecting on him and his fame. But again, imagine that you're in your mid-20s, you've never walked a fashion show, and now you're walking with professional models. That would be pretty intimidating.
Right, in the fashion world, in the capital, and everybody's watching you. So this photo that you actually have in your book is Pac backstage. It appears to be backstage or somewhere.
On the street, yeah.
On the street, but he does look like he's in deep thought.
Yeah, it's a great photo. So that's from photographer David McLean. And I think a lot of Pac fans will be surprised because it's not a very well-known picture of him. And I just love it. It's just him in contemplation. And you can just see like what a gorgeous man he was. One interesting thing, all the feedback from Milan was how he had beautiful eyelashes. They all talk about Pac's eyelashes.
Yeah.
And I think you can only wonder what would have been his trajectory in that world had he lived, because it seemed that he very much resonated with Italy and that sort of European way of life. So we can only imagine.
Just seeing all these photos, how hard was it to license these photos for the book?
That's a good question. So fun fact, the author has to pay for all the photos. So some of your favorite nonfiction books have no pictures. Please don't come for the writer. But for this, I felt I have to invest in the book.
Yeah.
It's a fashion book, and if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And it was a combination, reaching out to individual people, for example, like David McLean for the Pac picture, Sean Mortensen, his estate for the big picture, and then also just, people like Dapper Dan, April Walker, Karl Kani, and then also some stock images as well. But I wanted to make sure to pick stock images that some of them you've seen, but I think a lot of them will feel very new.
They are.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's the classic photos that we expect, but
like even Lil Kim. Of course, there is the picture of her at the VMAs,
right?
But I also wanted the photo of her at the Met Gala. She was there as a guest of Versace and the first rapper there. I mean, Puff was there that year with J-Lo as well, but Kim was there as a guest of Versace. Right. A lot of people don't know that. So I wanted to make sure that photo was included.
You know, why do you think Kim never was on the cover of Vogue America?
It's funny. I feel like this press run for this book has kind of turned into me campaigning for Lil Kim because that question comes up every time. And I think the reason why people are just so passionate, like in our minds, it's a no-brainer.
Right.
From that hardcore poster that I like to joke turned boys into men, that from that moment to every music video, album cover, working with people like Donatella Versace or David LaChapelle, Kim embraced high fashion and high fashion embraced her. So it was a very interesting symbiosis. But I think, again, the fashion establishment at that time, they weren't ready. If you think about it, the first female rapper on American Vogue was Cardi B.
Right.
That wasn't a long time ago.
At all.
Right?
At all.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that she's not deserving of it. Of course she is. But there were so many other great female rap artists that, you know, made an impact on high fashion, Kim being one.
Foxy,
Oh
Eve,
my
she
gosh,
had her
let
own
me start
line.
on Fox. I love Fox.
Even a
Nicki.
Kimora Lee Simmons.
And to know that that's never happened for them, that they never had the opportunity.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too comes the idea of sexism because
Of course.
somebody like Puff was in Vogue, I believe like 99. He did that famous pictorial with Kate Moss shot by Annie Leibovitz. Obviously, Kanye got the cover with Kim Kardashian. So I think sometimes it truly is timing that someone like a Kim, I think, was too early. But it is difficult to kind of get in through those gatekeepers. And Vogue is considered the high fashion Bible. I mean, even to this day, how many female rappers do you see on the cover?
Yeah. I feel like they could still honor. I feel like they could do right by the legacy, you know, of hip hop and women and the impact that it's had on high fashion. Don't you think they could? I mean, it's not gonna right the past, but I feel like there's always room to grow, and I feel like they can still do it if they want to do something.
Yeah, I mean, there's been talk. Could there be a Met Gala theme of hip hop? Right. That would be kind of interesting. Could there be some sort of CFDA Lifetime Achievement Award, something like what Dapper Dan won years later? And Dap's another great example where the high fashion industry rated him out of business and only decades later is he welcomed back into the fold. And largely that was due to social media being a great evangelist for him. So I think there's a lot of conversation, but Lil Kim, I feel that there's a lot of passion, interest in doing something with her. So I would love to see it.
You know what, Katrina and I were actually talking about how Eve doesn't get the credit that she deserves when it comes to this space as well. And I mean, Eve was doing it.
And not just fashion, just Eve.
TV
the multi-hyphenate.
Right.
Yeah.
A businesswoman. Like she
That's
had
right.
the TV show, she had the fashion. She was an amazing rapper, but nobody never thinks of her when they think of their favorite female rappers or their favorite rappers. Just the impact she had. And I don't think people, it's just crazy to me.
Yeah. And a lot of times too, it's funny because we're in an era now of like nostalgia and because of social media and the internet, we're able to have those moments. But back in the day, once you were sort of out of the public eye, that was it. So I love this idea of the OGs getting their flowers, having a career that extends beyond the age of 35. I think it's great. But I think as we've seen with Hip Hop 50, so much focus is still on the guys. Like women are still kind of the little footnote. All right, and now the program, we're going to have the women perform.
Right.
Okay, you guys done? Great. Can the guys come back out?
Next. Right, let's go, let's
have them
go.
close the show because those are still the headliners.
Right.
So I think that's a larger a conversation about the decision makers, who's programming things. And I just, again, hope that there just is more visibility because absolutely, as a multi-hyphenate,
Man.
as a businesswoman, you know, Eve had her own line, Fetish, and there's a great picture in the book with her showcasing some fetish. And I think it's important because otherwise, again, it's so easy to forget the history. And I think as time goes on and there's fewer and fewer sort of hip hop institutions showcasing history, I just don't want like that next generation to forget about it.
It's funny because you even mentioned that in the beginning of the book. Everyone thinks of Kool Herc as the grandfather of hip hop, but he was DJing his sister's party that she was throwing.
And she was throwing it for her after school wardrobe as a fundraiser.
The full circle moment.
Yeah.
Like, there you go. Hip hop and fashion literally started
Day one.
August 11th.
That's why I'm
1973.
putting in the preface for anybody who thought that this book doesn't need to be made. Just read page 1. There.
Done.
Done. Mic drop.
seeing this brings so many great moments. Seeing Aaliyah obviously wearing Tommy Hilfiger. I mean, that's our era.
You wanted the Tommy jacket.
You wanted everything. And I did buy the bootleg. This is a true fact.
I did as well.
I couldn't get one.
I did as well.
My mom wasn't with it. She was like, you're good with what you got. I was like,
She didn't let you buy the bootleg?
We didn't have the bootlegs around. It was like, there was bootleg Polo, but there wasn't bootleg Tommy.
Yeah.
But I really like the blue one with the yellow. I think the one she wore in the Crush on You video that Aaliyah did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Okay, so again, I'm learning so much, which is why this book is so necessary. I am today years old finding out that Tommy Hilfiger did not say anything racist.
Crazy, right? You didn't have to burn all your bootleg Tommy. You could be wearing it right now.
Wow.
Insane.
Okay, so you dispelled this and clearly addressed the whole situation. Tell us more about it, because I think this should be discussed more. And it's very problematic how that rumor traveled the world, continued. And for someone who I like to think I'm somewhat informed, did not know.
Yeah.
That was not the case. So tell us more about it, because I think it's really important as we have this conversation and sharing the facts.
For sure. Tommy Hilfiger, for me as well, was such an iconic brand.
Yes.
And I mentioned also having a bootleg where his name was misspelled, but it was in cursive, so you couldn't really tell.
Please.
Right? But if you squinted, it's like, that's a different last name.
Right.
That's a different last name. And I'll never forget, and I write about this in the book. So I do intersperse myself a little bit. I think in nonfiction, it's a balance. I don't think the author should be too involved as a voice, but when it's relevant. And I take us back to when I was at Hillside Middle School in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and my friend Sarah L., there were many Sarahs, so Sarah L., who was the Tommy Hilfiger queen, runs up to me. She was a white girl. I can't wear this anymore. I said, why? You look great. Oh, because Tommy Hilfiger's racist. Where did you hear this? On Oprah. And I'm thinking, we're kids. We don't watch Oprah. Like, where did you hear this? But she was so adamant. And okay, say less. And from there, that's how I heard about it. So as I delve into this chapter, for many people, they heard about it on email. It was like this mass chain email that went out. If you wear Tommy Hilfiger, do not do this, forward this to 10 friends. It was basically, what we would deem to be like a viral moment. Everyone heard about it, either word of mouth or email. And at this time, the internet was still very burgeoning. So not everyone even had email. I certainly didn't. And it just became like larger than life, where now the press is covering it. And I interviewed both Tommy Hilfiger and his brother, Andy Hilfiger. And Tommy said, like, I was never even on Oprah.
Oh my
So how could that have happened? And years later, he did go on Oprah, and they together also dispel the rumor where Oprah's like, he had never been on my show. I don't know where it started. So Tommy's company, they did their own investigation, and he told me that they did target it to a college campus. So my guess is it was some just kid joking around, probably playing around in like their dorm room computer. But that rumor almost destroyed the brand.
That's so wild.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it never happened.
Was he furious about this? Like, what?
Yeah, I mean,
What?
he definitely says that it did hurt him because
course.
it's this idea of character assassination. And prior to that, Tommy had been very instrumental working with hip hop. Remember, Snoop Dogg was wearing Tommy on SNL, and that was like that watershed moment. And then later people like Aaliyah and Tretch, just everyone was in Tommy. So this notion that, wait a minute, I can't even say anything, because again, this is before the internet. Now a designer would probably go on social media, maybe do a whole like video, and they would try to scrub the internet of it. But back then it just persisted. And the fact that you're not the first person, a lot of people have told me after reading this book, I can finally wear Tommy again. It's funny, I was going to wear it today, and maybe I should have, but that would have probably shocked you.
I cannot wait to wear it again.
Yeah, I've been like, why are you wearing this? Because it's awesome.
Take that off before you sit down.
Yeah, but people don't know. And I think for me, wanting to then contextualize it, it's this idea of cancel culture before we even had a term for it, but also for designers, this responsibility that if you are going to be, especially as a white designer and working in hip hop, what is that responsibility? that idea of appreciation and not appropriation and just showcasing your true intent. But he wasn't the only one. Liz Claiborne was another person who, again, there was this random rumor that she too did not want Black and brown women wearing her clothing. And there's a fun little vignette. Spike Lee was interviewed, I believe, for Esquire magazine. And in the interview, he brings it up and the writer's like, that didn't happen. And he doubles down, yes, it did. So again, even someone of his stature, who arguably is in, the most 1% rooms of the world, like he believed it at the time. But this just shows you how fake news can travel really fast.
Oh, this is so sad.
Yeah.
It's devastating.
It's crazy.
Honestly, it's really
I think about my middle school self, how that news must have funneled to me, and how I took that news
How
and
did
ran with it.
Sarah L. hear about it in Kalamazoo,
Everybody
Michigan?
I didn't have
heard about
email.
it.
Yeah, we
It's
really
just,
did.
We knew though, and I knew. I was like, okay, I guess that's done.
Yeah.
And just to have taken it without like asking my brother or my mom, hey, is this real? Is this something?
Yeah,
we
no,
can figure
there
out?
was no conversation.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, that's what's
I
going
asked
on.
my friend
Done.
at the locker.
Done.
Like, oh, we're done? Cool.
Done.
But
Yeah.
it also shows how pure we were as young kids, right?
Right.
That we do want to be on the right side and we do want to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
But man, when you are getting lies fed to you and it just shows the power also of media and why it's important to have, things cited, get your facts checked, because you could be destroying somebody's life.
And I think now in the age of social media, we see that more than ever.
Oh,
right? I mean,
absolutely.
people are sort of getting canceled on like a daily basis, and sometimes there is no facts. Well, somebody said it. Who
Right.
is this person?
Right.
What is there? Some receipts?
Like,
Is there
are they credited?
is there
Like,
some
who are they?
citation, MLA version, something? And
No.
I don't have to because this is what I said.
Right. Oh, it's so scary.
Yeah.
Very scary. What do you think about the companies who have made mistakes within high fashion, and they do apologize and, it seems to be fine? Do you feel like there should be room for redemption in that space?
Yeah. I mean, I'm someone who I don't believe in cancel culture.
Sure.
I believe more in accountability culture,
Right.
meaning that based upon the punishment should commensurate with the crime.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone shows true contrition and is actually remedying it, I
Right.
don't believe in just sort of casting people off to some island. That said, I do think oftentimes apologies are performative.
Right.
And we saw a lot of that during the BLM era. And I do talk about that in my book. So many companies said we're about diversity and inclusion, and they posted their black square with so much pride. But what changed in the C-suite? And what about compensation? And how what's really going on? The fashion industry, again, it's very similar to media, music business. Just the barrier to entry to work in the industry. Most people either come from money or they don't have to work, or it's, some sort of nepotism hire. And then as people move up through the ranks, you don't really see a lot of diversity, whether it comes to race or class or education, things like that. So I would love to see the industry, any industry who wants to make a change and who says that they want to actually make a long-term commitment, right? It can't just be having some celebrity as your creative director. That's great. I'm sure they bought a new boat with that money. But what about the intern? Does that person really have a career? And in the C-suite, who's making decisions?
Right.
It can't just be one diversity officer who's really empowered to enact change in your company. So I'm one of those people. Like, I'll take the verbal apology, but at the end of the day, your actions showcase your true intention.
And now we're seeing that the diversity officer is first to go during
They
the
really
budget
are.
cut. Like,
Yeah, those black
is what
squares
is
meant nothing.
That is currently what is happening right now.
Yeah.
And people are not, maybe they are reading it. Let me not assume. But, when I'm reading these articles and you're seeing which departments are getting cut first, I mean, so all the proof that you need that, we are living in an unjust world. And that's unfortunately the situation. It doesn't matter where you look around you. It's happening.
Yeah. But I think the companies that are truly have an interest and commitment,
Right.
you can sort of tell someone where their heart is.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes it's just seeing it over time.
Right. I agree.
Certain companies, if they want to work with the hottest hip hop artist, and then after that 15 minutes is over, all right, well, that's been great.
Right.
On to the next.
See you later.
Yeah, versus actual designers and brands who are investing in the space, giving people opportunities, catapulting their careers. So to me, again, you can tell a lot how by people's actions and over time. But a lot of it too, the onus is on the consumer. If these things are important to you, support those brands. Because I think we're also in a very intriguing era now where I think discourse is at an all-time high, but also your average consumer does not live on Twitter. Like we live in the echo chamber of Twitter, and especially like hip hop media Twitter, which is even more of an echo chamber. I talked to a lot of like young people. Kanye was never canceled. Like, what are you talking about? Those Yeezys sold out, you know? And I think that becomes tricky too from a company perspective. How do I balance public perception and the bottom line? Because if my consumers don't care, why would you expect a faceless corporation to care?
Yeah. Oof. A lot to unpack.
A lot of bars there. This is
a
what
lot.
happens when you spend 3 years writing a book. These are the things swimming through your mind. But I'm also optimistic. You know, I am somebody who, although this might be the current landscape, I do always hope that there are opportunities and room for growth and room for improvement. And I do think that with Gen Z specifically, there's a level of transparency.
Right.
And many of them do want brands to be, you know, either eco-friendly or green or have some level of a social conscience. So in that case, I think we're going to be all right because I think that's where that generation is really going. But again, there's always room for improvement.
We were talking about Cameron earlier and, you know, iconic pink fur jacket, which should be in a museum. And I know Cam had said that he rejected a $300,000 offer for it.
Wow.
I'm happy he rejected it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously.
It's like, how do you put a price on the Mona Lisa? You know?
There is none. And that's why I feel like it needs to be in a museum. It's really important. You spoke about Harlem. Speaking of Cam, you spoke about Harlem being the best place for fashion in New York.
I mean, those are fighting words. Every person from New York I interviewed, I asked them, which borough is the flyest? Harlem. And even people outside of Harlem are like
Harlem.
I got to give it to them. They just look good.
How do you feel about it? You agree?
They really do. That is kind of my weakness. If you're a guy from Harlem who went to the tunnel in 98, just call me right now. That was so specific, but yeah, you know,
very specific.
Yeah.
I'm actually sure Funk Flex might know someone because he was
he was at Funk Flex night.
Flex was
at
actually
the tunnel.
DJ. Absolutely. Okay, so where do you
Quick aside, you know that Funk Master Flex voiceover comes from David Letterman?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great, right? And Rosie
so
Perez.
good.
Rosie Perez.
So
talking
good.
about
So
the tunnel,
good.
Funk Master Flex night.
And every time I hear that, I'm just like,
yeah. But see, the fact I know this means I can only date somebody who would get that and want to talk about
It's
that.
a must.
Yeah.
It's a must.
Yeah.
Okay, so who has the worst, your opinion?
Of the boroughs?
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say
great
it.
attempt. It's good effort, but we're talking in relation to Harlem.
Well, I think everybody is a pale second, but when I talk to people for obvious reasons, I don't think Staten Island gets its representation because it's Wu-Tang, right? And they obviously had their own style. And I've got to, of course, tip my hat off to Raekwon and the famous, you know, polo moment. But people just don't think of it in general as part of any kind of conversation. So I'm going to put them in that, but I don't know if that's, you know, particularly fair.
Yeah, they get slept on.
I
think that might be the title of it, right? Like they're, Oh, that made me like get sad right now.
Interesting though, the Wu Wear went away for a while and relaunched a few years ago,
right?
In conjunction with Live Nation. So I could just see that as merch living forever.
Right. They can just continue to sell brands with their logo on it.
100%.
Nonstop.
Baby Fat,
that's it,
is back.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Baby
man,
Fat
I had a nice black and gold
Man,
Baby
I
Fat
had a
jacket.
nice jacket. Come on, stop it. I'm
that
so
cat.
happy.
Yeah.
I'm so happy when I saw it. I was so happy for Kimora. It was such an important brand. I know, listen, I saved up my money to get anything Baby
Those
Fat.
jeans just made everyone look good.
Right.
Everybody.
I don't know what like wizardry and spandex
Bring
or what
it
she
back.
did. Yeah. Well, what's funny about Kimora is a lot of people don't give her the credit as a streetwear originator. Right. Because if you think about it, that was still considered a quote hip hop line. And if you look at sort of the lineage of streetwear and women in streetwear, baby fat has to be discussed within that context.
100%.
So that was
100%.
also important, whether it be April Walker with Walker Wear or Kimora with baby fat, also amplifying them within this spectrum of streetwear innovators, because I think even on the streetwear tip, they don't get those accolades.
I'm about to go buy so much baby fat when I'm
man.
done. I'm about to go get Tommy to make up for all the years I've been
All of the
lied
years
to.
that you did him
been
wrong.
lied to.
Do you want to go to the tunnel, guys? Is that
Yeah,
a
while
thing?
we're there,
It seems
huh?
like it's 98 all over again.
DJ, let's
Yeah.
go.
Okay, so in the book, you were also talking about, which I'm glad you were discussing about, just the magazine covers. And we saw Vibe when it came to the East Coast, West Coast, and their coverage of it. Do you think these covers played a very important role into the violence that happened and ultimately taking Pac and Big's life, being a part of it? Not the sole reason. Obviously, there's like multitude of reasons behind every tragedy that happened, but what was their role in this?
Well, we have to remember at the time, hip hop coverage was largely relegated to magazines like Vibe, radio. That was basically it. Now we take for granted, you see it on social media.
Right.
And Vibe was very much the torchbearer of hip hop journalism. People like Pac would give these exclusive interviews to someone like a Kevin Powell at Vibe. And people waited with bated breath every month to see what that cover was, to actually read the articles. Right. And that became part of the conversation. I would never say that a magazine cover correlated to the tragedies that occurred, but I do think that media does amplify what's going on. And of course, you're dealing with, at the time, young men. There's ego, there's passions are, inflamed and emotions are high. So yeah, you see those covers and everyone's now in your ear talking about it, and every radio interview they want to talk about it. So I think sadly it's a part of the larger zeitgeist. But I do think for Vibe, it was really important for me to showcase it as an important cultural milestone.
Right.
Because Quincy Jones from day one wanted it to basically be the hip hop Vogue or the hip hop Rolling Stone. And the first editor-in-chief was actually a gay white guy named Jonathan Van Meter. A lot of people don't know that. And he got the job because he came from fashion. And when I interviewed him, he said, I just hired people from the fashion world. So even those original Vibe covers, the way people like Tretch or Snoop Dogg are photographed is so beautiful and artistic. It really was meant to elevate. And I do think that Vibe has just such a special place in this confluence of hip hop and fashion. I got to also give props to The Source.
Of course.
The Source magazine, of course, the hip hop Bible, but that's where Tyson Beckford was discovered, in the pages of The Source. That was his first look before Ralph Lauren came around. So it showcases that even something that was considered more of a music publication was so instrumental in figuring out what this hip hop aesthetic. And before social media, I grew up in the Midwest. I learned how people in New York or LA dressed from music videos, from magazines. It truly was like this portal into the rest of hip hop as a whole.
Did you feel like the magazines impacted how you viewed artists and musics and coasts during that time? Like when you saw that cover, did you pick a side? And being that you were from the Midwest, what did you pick?
Well, my ear was always towards East Coast hip hop.
Sure.
It is what it is.
It's the coverage too.
Mobb Deep, Nas, Biggie, Jay, like that's DJ Premier. Like that's just my, what flows through my veins. Again, I should have been in the tunnel in 98 if I was old enough. I would have moved here to run to the tunnel.
Can you imagine if we were all old enough?
Oh
my
I
God.
would have been here.
We always talk about, oh man, if we were just
Yeah, I feel that we
would
just missed it.
Right.
Because in the 90s, I was like, we were still kids.
Yeah.
Had we just been like 10 years older.
Just
Right.
10 years?
Just 10 years.
That's a big gap.
That is a big gap.
It's a big gap.
Well, I came right as I was an intern right towards the end. I interned at Bad Boy. But by that point, they had sold Rockefeller. Like,
Oh, no,
Rough Riders
no.
was done. Like, I was like, it's not the
we
same.
had to be 15 years older.
15. Wow.
I think
okay. 15.
really to really be in the golden era of what was happening primarily here in New York.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah. I would have loved to be at like maybe from like 90, mid to late 90s.
Right.
Right. Yes.
And everyone's just making crazy money. So
Early 2000s.
Yeah. Oh, I love the
that's
aughts. Are you kidding me?
For sure.
In my mind, I was like a part of Dipset. Right. Like, why not? And this was also a time when writers were actually getting paid, what, $3, $4 a word? Like, those days are long gone. Yeah, I think for me, I was always in tuned to the East Coast. But because I got my media through things like MTV and BET and magazines, like I remember so distinctly the news. It was Kurt Loder on MTV News telling us that Pac had passed. And the next day at school, like girls just sobbing.
Oh yeah.
And then when Big had passed, like same thing. It was like this collective cultural moment that it didn't matter where you were from or where you lived. It's like we all shared those moments.
Oh, it was so heartbreaking. I'm just like reliving it right now.
Yeah, Kurt Loder, MTV News.
It was so heartbreaking.
Dude, the radio station where I'm from played Life Goes On back to back to back to back
Wow.
to back after Pac died, nonstop.
Wow.
Did you know West Coast radio at all? So Theo was an on-air personality, had a really distinctive voice. I think he was actually in one of Pac's music videos.
Wow.
And I remember him sobbing on the radio.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I think it was just everyone was heartbroken.
Wow.
I remember crying, being devastated,
Yeah.
and then writing the lyrics to Pac and Big and everything in a journal because for whatever reason, it just made me feel better. And I wouldn't, because like my parents would go through my stuff, so I didn't write any of the curse words because they would take it away from me. But it was just, I didn't know how to channel like my pain and my sadness. But I remember that moment being all of it, just so heartbreaking. And now that we're here in this position and just older now, I feel like we got played a little bit by the media. I do.
Really?
I feel, I
Like
do.
it was like sensationalism.
Absolutely, I do. And I think because we were so impressionable, I mean,
Yeah.
girls crying at school and all these things that were going on, of course it's devastating, but the images still are in my head of just how the media portrayed it. I didn't know what was going on in New York radio at that time, but from what I've heard,
Same. Yeah.
I don't think it was that, gleeful towards the West Coast. You know what I mean? And so I just feel like, man, I don't want to be part of that.
It's hard because I think, and I have this conversation ad nauseum about hip hop media now, before it was a handful of sort of gatekeepers.
Right.
So it was radio, magazines, and that television. But now anybody with a phone has an opinion.
Right.
And to me, it feels like there's kind of the two extremes. You either have in media, you have to be obsessed with artists and talk about how great they are all the time.
Right.
Where you're their biggest fan. And any level of critique, you're a hater. I get that a lot on Twitter. Or you have to just eviscerate everything. It's scorched earth. It's about trolling, poking at the bear. The artist is going to say something. So ask them the most outlandish, flagrant shit because that's going to get you clicks.
Right.
And to me, neither extreme is
agree.
good. There has to be some level of, like, who's the adult in the room?
Right.
Are we the adults?
Right.
Wow.
It's concerning. I mean, it is. 'Cause
It's terrifying.
It's very.
And I feel bad for artists because, again, they're all on social media.
Well, and that's why you have the artists when people are giving feedback like, oh, they're going to go do an interview with, an influencer, right? But the conversation's light. There's no depth to
Laying
it.
in a bed, perhaps.
Maybe.
With
but
a glass
but
of wine.
here's the thing. To what you just said, I understand, right? Because no matter which way they go, it's going to be used against them. So why am I going to put myself in a deep situation when I could go do something light, not think about it, not have to deal with it later on? And I feel like that's a part of media's fault. Like, and I see it, right? I don't want to be part of those conversations where they're very divisive in the sense that it's so toxic just to get clicks.
Yeah.
And I understand what that means for me. Okay, I might not get the interviews. Okay, I might not go viral. Or I might not end up on these blogs. But I do feel at some point, I would hope that I've evolved as a person, right? And like I'm not talking about somebody's like love life all the time.
It's not even
I'm
that
not
interesting. I interview a lot of
Sometimes-
artists. Their love lives are not that interesting.
Sometimes it's interesting and sometimes it's really not. But you don't have
really
to
not.
force it to become the talking point all the time. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's tricky though, because I think there's culpability on the artist side and the media. and the fans. And I think the reason we have such a connection to some of the artists we came up with is because they did give interviews. Like Pac gave some real interviews. Many of them were contradictory and fiery, but he spoke, and he spoke from the heart. And I think now so many artists, they're concerned about protecting the brand and what will, whomever say on the internet, that I feel I see so much of you and I know nothing about you.
Right.
And I'm someone who follows like the charts on a weekly basis. I think there's a reason catalog is doing better than new music, because people aren't feeling that visceral connection. Like, I know nothing about you, so why should I care?
So do you think it's more of that, or do you think it's more of the quality of the music that, the catalogs aren't resonating?
I think it goes hand in hand.
Interesting.
And it's the
Interesting
saturation of the market.
And that too. It's really hard.
Everyone's dropping an album or a song or a mixtape. Something's coming out every Friday. Like, how do you have time to really sit and digest what you've got from an artist when you got another artist dropping tomorrow or dropping next week?
It's a lot. It's nonstop.
Yeah, I think there has to be a paradigm shift though, because if it continues this way, I just feel like we're in this era of disposable music.
Yeah.
And what does that mean for the genre or for these artists? But I think it's also, things change when artists would come. And I remember it happening. So as an interviewer, I really came up during the blog era. So I was interviewing,
Great era, by the way.
Cole and Kendrick and Big Sean, all these people. And they still wanted to be rappers. Mm-hmm. And it was really important to be seen as a good rapper.
Right.
That mattered to them. Then as we got into maybe what I'll call, let's say, the SoundCloud era, 10 years later, I would interview artists, brand new, just got signed. Okay, so what got you interested in music? Oh, I don't want to be in music. Wait, why are we here? Oh, I mean, I went viral. Oh, so what are your dreams? And I'm thinking they're going to say, I want to sell 1 million records or win a Grammy. Oh, I want to make a lot of money. And they were defiant about it. There was no shame about it. Right. Everyone was a mercenary. And people will openly say now, I'm not a rapper. I don't want to be called a rapper. I'm not a good rapper. Well, they won't say that part. But it's really about just securing the bag. And you have to wonder, if that becomes the predominant mentality, what does that mean for the music, the artistry, the interviews? I mean, some of the interviews I've done, it's been like pulling teeth, because if the person doesn't like rap, they don't want to be a rapper, they don't want to be here, why am I here? I could be at home watching The Office and be happy.
Wait, you were doing a Q&A on Reddit and you were sharing a story about an artist chasing you around the room?
Yeah.
What? Wait.
That was strange.
Wait, but why? Were they like playing a game? Was this
were y'all
tag?
playing chase, tag? What was going on?
Like, is it a game if I didn't know it was a game and I wasn't having fun? Is that a game?
Wait, what is the context? Like, why they decided?
I don't know. So somebody on
Were they
Reddit,
laughing? Were they Okay, yeah. Let's bring it back so people understand what's going on. Because I am so blown away by this. Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So okay.
So somebody on Reddit had asked me. I'd just done like an Ask Me Anything around my book. What is like this? Was it the weirdest or craziest interview?
Yeah,
was it that?
I think it was weirdest.
Yeah. So I said I won't say no names, but there was an artist who just started chasing me around the room.
But like what? Sorry,
I wasn't in.
Like, were you guys sitting down talking, then all of a sudden the artist started running after you? Like,
kind of, yeah. And it was very
Were
perplexing.
they laughing? Were they?
I suppose they were. It was some version of laughing. They were having a good time. I was just both perplexed and
oh my goodness.
Wasn't sure. I mean, luckily I have cat-like reflexes, so I was able to sort of dodge and weave. That was strange. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing when you.
That is so strange.
And yeah, very unsettling.
It's weird and concerning. Yeah. Do you think they were trying to like attack you, or do you think they were just trying to be
maybe some version of, like you said, play tag or
I just can't.
Is it some sort of like foreplay perhaps? I don't know.
I can't fathom.
Yeah, it's very weird.
Oh my gosh, that's
especially, and that's one thing when you do spend time with artists in their space, in their home,
right,
or with them. Sometimes they get really comfortable. Like artists have told me things that they probably haven't even told like their best friend. I've had guys like sobbing in front of me. And again, I would never share that because if it's not for me to share certain things, but people do very much trust you and confide in you and tell you things.
Have you ever had to break that trust and share something about someone?
I mean, for me, the way that I approach it, if it's relevant to the story, it stays in. But if I'm not going to say something that's going to like jam you up, or if I know that you're cheating on your very famous girlfriend, how does that help this story, right? And honestly, I don't know your situation behind the scenes, none of my business. So you have to be a little bit discerning. But again, when somebody sort of pulls you in, as long as nobody's being like hurt, like actively, those are the things that obviously I think we have a responsibility. But if it's just, you know, somebody sharing some personal stuff or they're going through something, I've told people you should go to therapy. I've even told artists you should like leave the game. Like, it's not worth it. Like, where you're mentally and emotionally at, it ain't worth it. Much to the chagrin of the publicist who might overhear that. But it's like, once you've been in this game long enough, it's a different dynamic. Because when I first started, you're young, you're in your early 20s, and you're interviewing artists who are probably twice your age. Many of them you grew up fans of. Now I'm almost in kind of like the OG, like big sister role. So I feel a little bit protective. So when I see people doing things or making certain decisions, it's like, maybe don't do that.
Right.
Again, you're grown. You make more money than everyone in this room combined. But, you know, just it's not worth it.
Do you feel like your concern gets confused with hate? You know, when you're just sharing your opinion, like, oh, I don't think that person should have done that. You're coming from a genuine place of critiquing versus
any critique gets hate. I like to think my hot rap takes on Twitter are often ripped apart. On any given moment, I'm beefing with some artist. You know, here's the thing. To me, there's a difference between just hating for hating's sake.
Absolutely.
And someone who has a critical background, an analysis, and a genuine love for hip hop. So even recently, you know, I said my piece about the new Drake album, and of course, all of the Aubrey's Angels are still in my Twitter feed. You know, he got into his feelings about it, but it's like, dude, I've been a day one fan. I know your discography. I know what you're capable of, and we can go line by line in this album and deconstruct it. That's not hate, that's critique. And I think we're in a time in our culture now, anything that you don't agree with automatically becomes the enemy.
Right.
And we see that whether it's politics or any kind of conversation on social media. And sadly, I think it actually is detrimental to hip hop and to artists, because imagine everyone just tells you you're great all the time, all the time. Now, people in your circle are paid to tell you that. They're literally on payroll to tell you how great, skinny, hot, young, whatever that you are. But critics, that's not your job. And there should be some level of gatekeeping, because we have the knowledge, we know what the marketplace is. We listen to music that's out, we listen to music that's unreleased. Like, we're coming from a different purview, right? And that, in my opinion, should not be looked at as like fans. Like, we're not fans. I am a fan of people's music, or I might admire certain attributes about them, but you don't want me to be a fangirl. That wouldn't do nobody good, you know? But I think in hip hop, there is kind of this notion of access journalism. And if you're not like a huge cheerleader, then you're a hater. And to me, it's like there's nuance.
Did you ever get worried about something you wrote having, I mean, similar to what just happened, having the blowback on you where somebody might kind of run up on you and be like, hey, that review or that article you wrote was not what you told me it was going to be?
Well, I have been told numerous times, you will never work in this town again, which is something people used to say a lot. Like when I first got into the industry, they don't say it as much, like this idea of like you have control. And of course, I'm like, no one man has all that power. So that's not happening. No, I think when I was younger, for me, it was always important to feel like I was understood, because I never played in that sort of salacious pond. If something is factually inaccurate, if I say you were born in December and it was January, well, that needs a correction because that's factually inaccurate. But in the beginning, I would sometimes feel, again, just wanting to be understood. But after you've done this as long as I have, you just kind of stop giving a because I have the integrity of I know my work. And oftentimes, like, you know, I remember there was a rapper who got really in his feelings about the article. And I'm like, did you read the article? He said, no. I was like, did you read the headline? No. So you read the tweet leading into the article. Cool. Okay. So that's what we're doing. But again, it's like, what do you want me to say? I don't care.
Also, to a note that you had mentioned that editors, come up with the headlines and
Usually a social media editor, yeah.
And so, a lot of times people aren't aware of how publications actually happen, or a post, or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, usually the headline is by the editor. The tweet is from a social media person. And even in the text, I mean, I've written articles and great features. And the artist felt, well, you got to take this line out. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. But then they kick it up to like the editor-in-chief, and the editor-in-chief acquiesces. And I'll say, look, I think you should keep it in. Well, he doesn't like the way he sounds there. I'm like, but it's real. And it shows this level of authenticity and vulnerability that adds to who he is. But if they acquiesce, I can't do anything. But I don't strike anything unless it's factually inaccurate.
Has there ever been a moment where you just said, okay, well then don't publish it?
I think only a couple of times. I'm like, you can just take my name off because it doesn't read like I didn't write this.
Right. And that's okay.
And I really don't need the $50 that's coming to me.
Right, because you edit it so much.
Yeah.
Just take the credit.
Because some editors want to be writers. It's like, some rappers want to be singers and some singers want to be rappers. That's a thing in the writing, editing world. Yeah. Some editors want to be writers.
So wait, you don't have to be a good writer to be a good editor?
Nah, not at all. In fact, I think they're two different skill sets.
Interesting.
Because the editor has a different type of vision, right? Sometimes it's like the grammar, or I need more information here. But writing is a different beast. Like I couldn't be an editor. I have no interest in editing.
Interesting.
Because if I read your writing, I would be all up in there. It's like I would add all my spices, and at that point, that's not the dish that you were making.
I think I would like to be an editor.
Okay. A good editor like makes the writer's voice shine through.
Yeah, I think I say that because when Katrina writes something, I'm just losing my mind. That's how I was asking
Katrina,
her.
do you think she's a good editor?
I think she'd be a good editor. I'm a poor writer, but I'd be a poor writer.
No, and Katrina loves to read books. She is, she came in second place in the spelling bee champ as a child. I
came like 8th in one.
This is a movement.
The word that I like missed, bald. B-A-L-D. Yeah. And my dad.
How did you miss bald?
I said B-A-U-L-D.
Oh man.
I know.
I think you're thinking too hard about it.
I was in my head.
I missed 2. I was second place in 2. I missed poisonous in 4th grade.
Ooh, that's a hard one.
And then I missed brood in 5th grade. I don't even know what that word means.
Ooh, like brooding. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I think I spelled it like witch's brew.
Oh, B-R-E-U.
Yeah.
E-D. That could have worked too. You should have asked.
It was wrong.
Please use it in a sentence.
I know. I used to be all about those too. With the
me
kids
too.
would be like this. I was like, oh my gosh.
Katrina, maybe you could become a writer. Maybe you can learn.
Or I can be a spelling bee like person that actually says the
words.
words.
But now it's hard. Now it's like MVP level. Like I was
been.
like words like bald, poisonous.
Right.
Now it's like Latin. Okay, use it in a sentence.
Right.
What's the root word? Like it's a thing now.
And these kids, I'm like, how do you guys know that word?
They're so much
They
smarter
like train.
than us.
It's a thing, especially among Indians. It's a big thing. Everybody's like in a spelling bee.
Oh man.
Meanwhile, I lost the word bald.
You were in 8th place. You were in second place.
I made it to second.
I will edit both of your guys' work at any time.
Thank
you.
Thank you so
I think
much.
it's because I'm really annoying with perfection. I'm not trying to be perfect. I really am not. But it just bothers me when it's like there's not a space.
You really do sound like an editor.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. But anyways,
if she had a red marker, everything I would probably have a whole red page.
Absolutely.
It's so awesome.
The good part though about book writing, so they'll give you edits, but there's something called STET, S-T-E-T. If you write that means no, keep it as is. So I had to do that a few times this book.
So you told them you can't touch this piece.
Yeah.
I'm a boss.
One thing that was a kind of a point of contention, they wanted to remove any like personal anecdotes. I have maybe like 3. And I said, no, I think it's important why I'm telling the story versus any other person.
Yes.
I like the Tommy story you put in. Personally.
Yeah, but that was initially, it was a huge X.
No way.
Well,
it made me go back to middle school and think about all the girls that had the Tommy. And I'm
Who
glad
said no? You're wrong.
Yeah.
You said you went through like 8 editors, right?
So interestingly enough, the person who acquired the book was this young editor, great energy, but she ended up leaving the business to go to law school. So that
I don't blame her.
Yeah, you can read between those lines. I had another editor, she left maybe in a couple of months. I hadn't submitted pages though, so it was fine. And then I had a third editor who's been in-house for a long time. Yeah.
In-house, what do you mean by that?
So she like works at the publishing house.
Got it. Okay.
But there were definitely like So, like, again, it's a give and take. Some of the edits, of course, they're good. They make the writing stronger. But others, again, from like a creative vision, I very much knew how I wanted this book to be. Even the format, I knew I wanted to start with Dapper Dan and end with him. But these were like points of contention. So there was a lot of like reject.
You know what I really like about your book too is that each chapter, like you can just pick a chapter, read it, and you don't feel like you needed to read the first 4 chapters ahead of it.
Yeah.
Each is kind of its own standalone piece, and then I love the appendix at the end. I miss those.
Yeah, I think every chapter had about 40 sources. There's a lot of research.
Hold on, can we highlight this?
Yeah.
It's like maybe a nerdy moment for
40.
all of us here, but
I had to relearn MLA citation. Do you remember that from college?
Yes, but it's so important. This is how we get actual information published. And this is why this book is also important. Maybe for me, I just see how harmful media is right now without fact checking, without just really any type of accountability behind what you're posting out there.
Yeah.
And I just love that you did that because facts do matter, guys. Facts really do matter.
Absolutely.
I understand it might not be like the viral moment, the clickbait that's going around right now, but at the end of the day, that's going to cause more harm than actually getting the facts. And I'm not saying that we can't be entertaining. Hello, of course you can be entertaining.
Yeah, I love entertainment.
But you can be entertaining with the facts. You can be entertaining by being witty about the facts. But I do think, Katrina couldn't wait to talk about that. I was like, out of everything, but it's because it's been so long since you've just seen any type of information cited.
Right. What's dope too is I have citations, everything from academic journals all the way to Drink Champs. I watched so much Drink Champs for this book. I loved it. I had this whole like nighttime routine. I do like skincare, put a robe on and watch like 3 hours of Drink Champs and take notes for my book.
That's great.
Do you have favorite episodes from Drink Champs?
I have so many. Okay, so I love Drink Champs when they would interview people who I hadn't heard from in decades.
For sure.
That to me is their sweet spot. One of my favorite is Mike Geronimo. There would be times in my life, just a regular day, drinking a latte, and I'm like, what happened to Mike Geronimo? These are things that go through my mind. If these are things that go through your mind, maybe you should work in hip hop. And he had like a 3-hour interview. I've probably seen it 5 times. I've laughed, I've cried, and he was extremely vulnerable, very transparent about his career, mental health things. It was so good. And I love the fact that I could not see that interview anywhere else.
This is such a moment right now.
I know.
Like you're really a fan.
I'm such a fan.
And I think that's important because it's hard when you're just a fan. And how heartbroken do you get when somebody just lets you down? Like it could be music or it could be an interview or it could be anything. And you're just like,
as in
come
like
on.
don't meet your idols or whatever it's called?
Yes.
When you're in the industry and you do have the opportunity to meet people that you looked up to, at some point you realize humans are humans. So that idea of celebrity and fame and that sparkle just sort of dissipate. So if you're a true fan of somebody, it probably is better to, you know, have a little bit of a distance. But, you know, I think the dope part is to be able to work with people that, you know, I used to have their picture in my Trapper Keeper.
Right. Yes,
Like,
to the Trapper Keeper.
Yeah, I used to rip out pages of Word Up in the library. Don't do that, kids. That was meant for the library. I would rip pages out and tape it to like my locker or my bedroom wall. So to be able to interview people like that, work with them, document their history, I think is dope. And to me, that's what keeps me excited about the industry. Like I always told myself, if it stops being fun, stops being exciting, I'm gonna go do something else. I'll go get an MBA or something.
Have you met your idol and they exceeded your expectations or it was fine and that's all you needed and you're good and you still enjoy them?
Yeah, sadly there were 2 who shall remain nameless. Both were crushes, like middle school, high school crushes. And one of them I interviewed and he was just in the worst mood.
Oh, no.
I also think he has kind of issue with like women interviewers. So me, in my infinite wisdom, he only was going to give me 15 minutes. It was one of those, he'll only talk to 5 outlets. You get 15 minutes.
Only 15 minutes?
That's it. So I said, all right, bet. We're going to keep talking. So we talked for 45 minutes.
Amazing.
Because you know what? If it's going to be awful, at least let it be 45 minutes of awful.
Right. Let's do it.
So that was one. And then the other was someone I was a huge fan. I mean, still am a huge fan of his music. personality, it was like watching paint dry.
Oh,
There was no chemistry.
Worse.
I tried to tell jokes. He didn't understand them.
Oh.
Yeah, my references, he didn't understand. It was really bad. Yeah, I almost wanted to just, I was like, but you inspired my AOL instant messenger name, like all of that. I know.
Oh no.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. But again, you got to go in looking at it. You're seeing a grown man, and this is your colleague now. So this idea of who you had on your bedroom wall, it's not the same.
Oh.
Yeah, it happens.
That
I mean, I'm
was
sure you've
cringy.
had that, right?
No, luckily. Well, okay.
Did you meet like your childhood crush yet, or no?
No, Tupac died. So
Wow.
luckily.
Luckily, he didn't have a chance to disappoint you.
But I don't think he would have, only because I'm still holding on, because everyone that I know that knew him or close enough proximity has spoken so highly of him.
That's true.
So I'm going with that. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yes.
And then the other person I did meet, and I will name, is Mariah Carey.
Oh, that's a good one.
She was phenomenal.
It would be a lie to say I may or may not have a butterfly tattoo, moderately inspired
Come on,
by her.
Lambs,
Listen.
lambs.
She's amazing.
Little did I know she had the temporary version, but I went and got the permanent version.
I can't wait.
Thanks, MC.
And by the way, she knows everything that happened, so hopefully she'll see this on her radar.
I did used to cut my jeans. Remember, you used to cut them at the top?
Yes, that was Mariah.
She was so genius. It was so comfortable.
That was Mariah 100%. I feel like she's also forgotten when we talk about fashion and the things that have started and created. I just feel like Mariah was just amazing. But thankfully, she was everything and more. And I say this, quick story. Someone could say, oh, it's because of what you do. You work at Hot 97, all these things.
This was at YouTube? Is that where you interviewed her? Because I went to that.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Oh, you were there?
I was there. Yeah.
That was fun.
Okay. So that was another moment for me. No. So before all of these interviews and getting to really know Mariah, I actually met her a long time ago. I remember coming out here to New York from the West Coast at the time because I was doing radio out there. And it was a Def Jam party when Mariah was like with them or something along those lines.
Well,
I think
okay,
Island
take
Def
me out.
Jam.
Are we talking Emancipation album, Charm Bracelet? She was there for both of those albums.
Maybe it was Charm.
That was post.
I don't remember when.
Who was heading Def Jam at the time?
I literally don't think I was even supposed to get an invite.
Fair.
I'm not part of the circuit in this world and this like.
This is also where my mind goes. Who was the leadership at
who
the
was
time?
the
Then I can know
leadership?
the
Look at
org
it.
You
chart.
know exactly when.
Yeah, I know
gotta
the
go on
org
your
chart.
Instagram to
you
find the
have to go.
picture.
It's
I
been
do.
it's
It was either the Leo era or the LA Reid era. That's what I'm trying to remember. LA?
I think
So
LA.
it is the Emancipation era.
I think.
Yeah.
So I literally just came to New York just to get into this party, hoping that I could get into this party.
Wow.
I got there so early that they,
That's
they
how
want
you
to
get
fill
it.
up. They want to fill up the
They
room.
probably thought you were like the caterer.
Like,
so yeah, go to
probably.
work. Yeah.
I was like, no, I work in like press stuff. I just,
I work in press stuff.
like stuff, media, radio, and I was just so happy to get in.
What was the venue?
It was somewhere. I remember how it
Was it
looks.
One Oak?
No, not
no,
during
no.
that era.
No, because it was post. It was like more.
It was in the
late.
It was in the
2010s,
meatpacking district. I don't know what it was, though.
2013.
Oh.
Standard.
I don't remember where
Maybe.
it was, but I remember the venue clear as day. And I remember I got in, and I literally, because I was part of radio and I was able to get in that way.
Finesse.
But I got in early. I got there early enough that they couldn't reject me if it got packed because I'm not a big name. I'm nobody, right? So I get in, and it's time to take pictures with her. And I'm not kidding you. I was like, oh my gosh, this is my dream come true.
You know what side? You know what side she likes.
And I was like this, and you know how
Yeah.
they placed us. Nick was there. They were like, it was definitely more honeymoon era between them. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, and there's Nick Cannon. And okay, it's really we're really gonna take a photo with her. She's really getting in position. She's got the champagne in her hand. She is smiling, having like just a ball. I get up to take a photo with her. And she's in such a great mood. And I don't know what I whispered in her ear, but she starts dying laughing even harder. She thought my joke was funny.
Great.
And I was like, wait a minute. I made Mariah laugh?
Oh my gosh, are we friends?
Are we
best
friends?
friends?
And she was like, you're a lamb. You're a lamb.
Wow.
And I was like, I am a lamb.
Look, where's the Underneath the Stars video?
Yeah,
I'm still waiting for it.
And she's like, you should talk to my team. Like maybe you can like help out or be a part of.
Wow, look at Mariah. She does more for the economy than the president.
Absolutely. And I was like this, wait a minute. She really was that nice.
Wow.
She doesn't know who I am, can care less. I'm nobody's. I mean, look, I am somebody in life. I get it. But at that time, there was no reason for her to be extra nice to me, extra mindful.
That's real.
I'm not a high profile person in the game. I'm someone who's just on the radio grind. And she was so nice to me. And I'll never forget that. Fast forward years later, I do an interview with her at Hot 97. She's early eating pizza, waiting.
Wow. That's also rare, though, because I don't know if you read her New York Magazine interview. I think it started at like 4 a.m. at her house, and the writer was like, well, I'm waiting for the interview.
But to be fair, from right now, you can see I'm putting my cape on. Mariah has like a flip schedule. She's a night owl.
She is a night owl.
So like for me, I'm more night owl energy. But all that to say, even when I did the interview, I remember that day I begged, like I told Colin, like my husband, I was like, Colin, please, I need you to come. This is Mariah Carey. He's like, look, whatever makes you happy, because like you're going crazy.
Right.
Colin comes to the station. I'm like, this is my moment. I have to know, like, if she really is as incredible as when I first met her.
Right. Is that job still open? I'm waiting to work for you.
I'm waiting to be a part of this officially. She was the nicest person.
That's
she
great.
got all the jokes. She
That's
wasn't
great.
scared to answer hard questions. I was like, are you going to get married again? She was like, girl, for a third time. There was nothing about her that just was like, oh, this is disappointing or
That's
cringy.
great.
Till this very day.
That's great.
Oh, man.
And that's rare.
Very rare.
That's why I don't want to meet anybody else. And
Yeah,
not, at least
it's
not in that
tough.
capacity at all, because maybe it's because she's accomplished so much. And
Yeah.
maybe that's something with the artists that we see when they're so accomplished, they have nothing to prove.
Nothing. She's the queen of Christmas.
She's like, what?
It's like Jesus and Mariah.
And
They
it's
just,
like,
that's Christmas.
and here she is getting ready, and she can care less about, okay, what are we talking? If we're talking number ones and all, I'm there. Okay,
I'm
you
there.
want catalog, I'm there. You talking about Christmas? I am Christmas.
Right.
Like, maybe that's part of
that
why
confidence, yeah.
Maybe that's part of why artists don't, do as many interviews with journalists or broadcasters anymore. I'm not really too sure. I think a multitude of things like has shifted and why they don't want to.
I think it's also hard because
What
social
makes it
media
hard?
has changed the game when I can speak directly to my fans. Why go
Good
through
point.
an intermediary? But no matter what, a good, especially like a written profile, like a 4,000 word piece, you can't create that.
Right.
And someone who's good at their job, like I can contextualize who you are, the world you operate in. And if there's something, a misconception or something about you that
Right.
you want to dispel, sometimes you need an outsider to come in.
Right.
Right. Versus I think now the trend is social media or like these documentaries. Everyone is doing these music docs, which are kind of just long press releases.
Right.
Like I watched them thinking, well, what am I learning?
Right.
Where was my moment of vulnerability
Wow.
or
Yeah.
that aha moment? It can't just be I'm great. Everything is great. And I do think certain artists, and I'll use Drake as an example, he always leaned into vulnerability. That was his superpower. So now when he's not doing those kind of interviews and we know very little about him at this life stage,
Right.
I can see why a lot of times fans feel disconnected. Who are you? I see you on Instagram, but what else is there? And I think that there is a definitive Drake interview because he's given good interviews in the past.
For sure.
But it's got to be through that lens. It can't just be talking to somebody who's going to be a fanboy, who wants to be like a new OVO person. Like, no, it has to be, this is a grown man you're speaking to, and it has to be from that level of respect. But I mean, I think the larger issue, whether it be Drake or other artists,
Sure.
is I feel that when it comes to serious conversations, rappers they leave hip hop. And I think that's a problem because coming up, it wasn't like that.
Right.
And my concern is it going to be that hip hop media is really just like a troll fest? It's all about clickbait, salaciousness, lies, people incriminating themselves. And when it comes to like legitimate conversations, I'm gonna go to NPR.
Yeah.
I'll go to Gayle King. And that's what it feels like. So for me, one of my hopes in kind of this next chapter of my career is to be an authority and a voice, but within the hip hop space. I think it's important because I mean, it kind of breaks my heart that the biggest artists, like, they outgrow hip hop. So what does that mean for us? Right? And I don't want to be one of those people. Well, I've outgrown it, so I'm going to go
Right.
work for the New York Times.
Right.
You know, and that's, again, no diss to those sort of capital J journalism places, but it can't be that you get to a certain point and you want to talk to every other outlet but us. And that's what it feels like. But again, with so many things in my life, if there's an opportunity, you can either run away or complain about it or try to do something to fix it. And I think there is a real need. I mean, I've talked to so many rappers who are just like, they'll thank me after the interview. That was a great conversation.
I guess I'm confused at what the hesitation is. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I think a lot of it is with any finding what the right platform is.
Right.
So if anyone has any ideas, please let me know. And understanding what does that even look like? Because again, even in hip hop media behind the scenes, it's kind of easy to just keep doing the same old thing.
Sure.
It kind of becomes musical chairs. People hop from one company to the other. And I'm like, guys, that's why people will go to Vogue and give that tell-all interview. They'll go to GQ. They're not coming to you. That's a problem.
I think it's also how they view the platform.
There's that too.
You know, when you're saying like, oh, they'll go to Vogue or whatever, they want that look and that look of fashion, high fashion world, and you know, certain
in the journalism
status.
world, it's like what would be called, quote, mainstream, right? And I'm not saying an artist shouldn't have those
But they
conversations.
can't do both, right? I mean, like, why are we limiting to this or that? Can it be this and that?
I would hope so. And I think I would also encourage managers and publicists to also think in that realm as well. Don't be so sort of narrow that you can only do one thing. So they only do covers. Okay, well, that's going to limit you.
Right.
Because there's not a lot of real estate for that. Or, well, they'll do the interview, but they want to control it. Well, that's not going to happen.
Right. Well, do you think the publicist, I just thought of this right now as you said, a publicist. Maybe the publicists are coming from the influencer, viral TikTok world, that they don't maybe look at print or just a regular interview with a journalist or a broadcaster as, you know, important because, hey, that's not what they're used to. They grew up on TikTok dances or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it's again, everybody plays a role. So in a previous life, I used to do PR. So I remember working, especially with that transition from print to online, and I would ask artists, big artists signed to major labels, where do you want to be? Fader, Pitchfork, Vice. Like they cared about that over so-called hip hop outlets. I think it's hard now for a lot of publicists because labels are signing so many artists. Like I've oftentimes done artist bios and the publicist, like, I never even met this artist. I'm reading your bio to learn about them. Oh. And it's not their fault. They're just signing so many people. So imagine you don't have someone sitting there able to take their time, do the research for the outlets. Some of my best stories came when publicists would come to me, hey, I got this artist. I see who else you've interviewed. This is the kind of access I can give you. And we almost like co-created the opportunity versus here's a press release. I hope it hits.
Good luck.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So it's hard. I understand their frustration too, because the landscape is contracted. And even the artists, like they want to be on Vlad and Budden and Drink Champ. Like that's what gets them excited. Right. And I think you can absolutely do that. But again, there should be just a spectrum.
Right. You could do this and that.
Yeah.
And
you go watch a podcast and read a book. Preferably at the same time would be great. But yeah.
Hello. Well, I'm so happy for you. I'm happy for this next chapter of your life. And I'm glad that you gave us something that you worked on so hard for so long. And here it is, despite the hurdles that I'm sure you face that we have no idea about. But thank you for giving us this. Thank you for taking the time to put this together and documenting something that needs to be documented in a beautiful way. And just like, come on, the texture, the effort that was done behind this, the pictures, hello.
Just buy it for the pictures. It's fine.
Hello.
Yeah. No judgments.
Absolutely. I mean, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So nice. Yes, let's go.